Transition, the process of change from one condition to another.
We are now at a new crossroad where change is evident once again.
What does not serve us must transform us anew.
Returning to our original state of oneness and true nature of that which created who we truly are.
Confusion was the way of the past. Enlightenment is the way of the now and future, shedding away the layers of deceit.
We now bring you the transformation of the two who started as one. Our fearless planet never stands still.
Earth has been in a process of transition, and we are not exempt from this remarkable ongoing reality. Well, hello, and good evening, and welcome. My name's Mark Angelo Cummings.
And I'm Lynna Ariel Cummings, and it's another Tuesday night.
And Transition Radio's Real Talk with the Cummings.
Yes, thanks for joining us, you guys.
Thank you. We always have a lot of interesting things to talk about. And today we're going to really focus on it's biological, not psychological. And what I mean, or what we mean by that is everything that happens as far as this transgender, transsexual paradigm, which a lot of people consider it a mental disorder, is not psychological. It is actually biological. And today we deem to prove that to you with many of the research papers and things that are coming out. And these are a lot of recent information.
But saying that, we're not dismissing the fact that people do suffer from psychological disorders within the trans community just as much as anybody else does.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Because we're not
exempt.
Trans and psychologically impaired because we're trans.
Exactly.
It's literally, that's a totally different issue entirely.
Well, you know what? I think this day and age, with this synthetic world that we're living in and all this technology and the excess amount of chemicals, a lot of people do suffer from some sort of mental disorder, mental handicaps, whatever way we want to call them, PTSD, you name it. So, it's unfortunate, that these are things that happen, but the actual ideology of this gender, quote unquote, confusion stems from a biological nature. So, as I pointed out here in this initial comment that I made, trans people's brains show some atypical changes away from their natal sex and towards their experienced gender identity. And there has been recent studies that point to this direction. As a matter of fact, right here.
A second major line of evidence regarding organizational T effects on GD stems from disorders of sex development, DSD. Across a range of DSDs, gender of rearing and presumed masculinization of the brain can be aligned, partially misaligned, or at odds, irrespective of sex chromosomes.
And that's the key, irrespective of sex chromosomes. For those of you that are a fan of the XX and XY and look at your genital mentality, irrespective of sex chromosome, females 46XX with congenital adrenal hyperplasia produce excessive amount of androgen as fetuses, which often leads to genital masculinization. In this group, relatively high rates of gender change or GD were observed.
5% among those raised as girls and 12% among those raised as boys. In individuals raised as girls, the cause might be the comparatively high prenatal T and its effects on the brain. In individuals raised as boys, early medical treatment of their condition implies that they did not experience the boy typical T surge after birth. Consequently, comparatively low perinatal brain masculinization might contribute to the development of the female gender identity.
So you see, it's not as simple as many of you think. Biology. Just look downstairs. This pretty much explains, that excess amount of testosterone inside the mother's womb will alter the brain. If you're a girl, very simply explains here, the high prenatal T and its effect on the brain will cause that individual to identify as a boy. And in boys, it would be the opposite. The brain was masculinized because of the surge after birth. It was like low perinatal brain masculinization, which is causing the gender identity of a boy to identify as a female. In 46 XY individuals with partial or complete androgen insensitive syndrome, testicular androgen production is normal, but has little or no effect. So it's being produced, but the receptors are not receiving that signal. And a lot of these may appear as what it's called as disorder of sex development, where a lot of people coin it as intersex. The actual doctor, what's her name? Jenny Graves doesn't like that term at all. And she's done so much research and so much papers and things of that nature regarding this phenomenon. But you all get the gist of that. It's not as black and white as many of you want to make it out to be.
It's true. I mean, there's so many variations and so many variables. I mean, we're talking 20,000 genes which make up our bodies, I guess, isn't it? And there could be literally thousands that go into our identity, our gender identity.
So Dylan joins us, and so does Elliot. Welcome, guys. Thank you for tuning in,
being here.
Yeah. So I hope that was kind of clear for you guys to understand, that the prenatal testosterone plays a massive role in gender dysphoria.
When a female differentiated after the 10 weeks or whatever gets an abnormal amount of testosterone, it could affect their brain gender identity development. Whereas with a male developed afterwards and following the path of masculinization, which means that they're going to develop all of those gonads and stuff, they also could experience lower levels of testosterone, androgenization, and develop a more feminine female gender identity.
Right, because what happens is if there's a high level of testosterone in the womb, the girls will experience, a high masculinization in the brain, and the boys will actually experience the opposite. So it works opposite for each said sex. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And actually I'm going to go ahead and share this link. Let's see if it's not too big. So you guys could really, get in there and read it yourself. But it's a latest study. It was actually written or done. The paper was done 23rd of January, 2020. So it's 2D, 4D suggests a role of prenatal testosterone in gender dysphoria. So there is a biological reason behind it. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Right. That's just one
particular thing. So we're going to go into what role do sex chromosomes play in transgender people's identity. And, be interesting to hear what this article has to say. So let me try to make this a little big so we can read it.
Biological gender and gender identity are two very distinct concepts. Biological gender or sex refers to the anatomy and physiology of a human body, whereas gender identity is influenced by a multitude of factors, most of which we don't fully understand.
And for those of you that think it's just a social construct, it is actually not. There is a biology ideology to it. So biological sex is purely determined by the choice of sexual differentiation pathway, which is guided by genes on the sex chromosome, though not exclusively. For example, WNT4 on chromosome 1, testes determining factor, TDF for short, or sex determining gene Y, SRY, located on the Y chromosome is one such gene.
SRY is largely responsible for testis formation. It is not the only gene, and a variety of pathways and proteins are involved. In this process of sex differentiation, some even located in the autosomal regions, but the SRY is special.
So, the sex determining gene Y, the SRY, was identified in 1980 by Peter Goodfellow's group. Goodfellow Group and others perform a series of experiments to demonstrate the role of the gene. So, 1980. Now, I wanted to point out that this whole concept of social construct was actually created in 1950.
Right.
Okay, and that the internal workings created within the species are biological in nature. It has nothing to do with psychology. Little boys who have more feminizing genes will demonstrate it in their behavior. They'll be more feminine and vice versa. This is why you see a very young child, that has a little boy that has very feminine traits, things like a girl, and I know people, what do you mean by things like a girl? They are predisposed. As much as you hate it, as much as it appears to be misogynistic, stereotypical, there are. I mean, they have tested these things out. There are predetermined behaviors,
right?
And
Patterns
of behaviors. I mean, it has to be that way. That's how nature functions. It couldn't function any other way. You got birds that have their homing device and they know which way they're going. You've got certain things that the female of the mammal does, and it's ingrained. That's how it goes. And so, that is very important to look at. And, we're also reading about the gene, there, the gay gene, or what does she coin it as? The sexual.
No, she calls it. This is she's like a geneticist and a professor or award winner. Right. She basically determines it as male loving or female loving genes.
Exactly. Right? And then you've got certain genes that will make one individual much more feminine than another individual. And this is seen in, like, you have a gay sibling and you've got the sisters who've got that gene, and they
have the male loving gene, so that means that they're going to typically have more children. Mm-hmm. They're probably going to be, likely to marry at a younger age,
exactly.
And, have big families.
Exactly. And so most of the religious sector will poo-poo on that, because the logic behind not believing that is that if they had to believe that, then they would have to accept that God would have made a sinner, because they add sin to people's natural occurring state. It's genetic, it's within their makeup, but they want to make that into a sin, which is totally absurd.
So Dylan says, I will always see it as a disorder or a neurological condition, regardless of this womb masculinization or feminization, until the day that it is seen as normal. It is just not.
Well, Dylan, with all due respect, we have been told many things according to the powers to be and to the political system and whatever else of what is normal and not normal. And you're going to be surprised when a lot of the things that we're going to share tonight on the show, what people think is normal, and it's actually not that way, and it's vice versa. Neurological conditions, yes, there's a neurological condition behind it, but there are genes that are responsible for certain behavior and certain things.
Well, I think that, and excuse me, and I'll apologize if I'm wrong, Dylan, but your all or nothing disposition here in this comment comes from a preconditioned place of
religion.
It's bad for you to be the way you are.
Yeah.
You feel ashamed that you're not being accepted as you would like to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that these factors, they really factor in to why you're saying what you're saying. Pardon me if I'm wrong, but I come from a very religious background. I dealt with all that guilt and shame and everything. And, it does have very strong effect on you.
You fight yourself. You fight, that's why I detransition on several occasions, because it's like your upbringing, that coding that has been put there has been cemented in your conscious. You want to see it.
Do you realize that there are two biological copies of you that exist within you at the same time? One is actively being suppressed,
mm-hmm.
and the other one is allowed to express. And there is one gene, the WNT4 gene on XX females, and the DMRT1 gene
mm-hmm.
in XY males that is constantly basically saying, no, you're male, no, you're male, no, you're male. So if that gene, and this is only one of the things that could happen with disorders of sexual development, which people would say, oh, you're not intersex because you don't have the following 12 categories of being intersex.
Right.
If they say, oh, the transgender community just takes that over and they use it. And it's the truth is that there are so many disorders of sexual development
mm-hmm.
that we have not even once begun to even understand.
Right. And as we read in the initial paper, in the link that you have right there, this is new stuff that's coming out. This is not something that, in the 1950s, when they started labeling chromosomes and all that stuff, there was a political agenda behind it.
There was a reasoning back in the 20s that all these societies started to come together and they wanted to basically control human population. I mean, we're talking the Rockefellers, we're talking about these endocrine societies and all these, the study of sexology and everything. Mm-hmm. It is a lot more involved and a lot more of a systematic setup of a control system to regulate male and female behavior and to put it in nice categories and to give you a nice chromosome that you could call a female chromosome and a nice one that you call a male one. And there's so much more involved.
A lot.
There's money involved, there's pharmaceutical companies involved, there's governmental control involved, there's subjugation, corporate interests involved. All of that is involved in the creation of this and what we have today.
So,
the sex determining, where we read that, Goodfellows Group. In one such study, they looked at the genetic information of individuals who were anatomically female and had both XY chromosomes and individuals who were anatomically male with XX chromosomes. They found the SRY gene in an X chromosome in 50 cases of anatomically male with XX chromosomes.
In one of the anatomically female case with XY chromosomes, they found a single nucleotide mutation in the SRY gene. That translated to a single amino acid change, one single amino acid change from methionine to isoleucine, thus disrupting the testes development process. A single amino acid change from methionine to isoleucine is the SRY gene can cause an embryo with XY sex chromosome to develop as a female.
It is not difficult to imagine that such de novo mutations can also play a role in gender identity. In another study in 1991, they were able to transform female mice embryo to male anatomically and behaviorally by simply inserting one single SRY gene.
Now, are you all grasping this? One single amino acid can actually alter, making an XY human that is supposedly a male into a female, right? So gender identity is very poorly understood. And I'll repeat that again. Gender identity is very poorly understood. But based on a number of studies from the popular case of David Reimer, who had gender reassignment surgery as a child and was brought up as a female after botched circumcision and transitioned to male at age 15, to multiple reports on genetically male with XY chromosomes and anatomically female who were brought up as female and later transitioned to male, it is safe to conclude that gender identity is less about behavioral, cultural, or social circumstances or upbringing and more biological.
More biological, you guys.
Yeah, nothing to do with psychology, trauma. And again, there are many people in the LGBTQ who have experienced lots of PTSD, lots of childhood trauma. There's a lot of people that do have some form of mental disorder, but being transgender is not one of them.
So Darcy joins us and says, "Hi, all." And then he says, "Dylan, you don't think that hormones that affected us in the womb had anything to do with why we are trans?"
Everything to do with it. Absolutely everything, without a shadow of a doubt.
And we're not even talking about the spiritual.
Yeah, that's another avenue. But today, we're really focusing on the biological because there seems to be a lot of naysayers, a lot of people that make fun about it, a lot of people, even in their own trans community, are doubting Thomases.
Yeah, they're like, I don't want to hear about the biological repercussions of being trans because there aren't none. They would tell you. So Darcy says, why can't it be a combination of both, Dylan?
Okay. And then Dylan says, let me go over here. These are abnormalities. It's not normal. I'm not saying it couldn't be eventually, but I'm a female. My brain developed differently. We wouldn't be seeing medicine or treatment if it isn't. What definition do you have, Dylan, that makes you say that you are a female? Because of the old ways of describing what a female is? The old biological XX, look down below, that's what you got. What if that wasn't the case, as in these articles that we're reading is explaining, that the brain gets bathed and develops a certain way differently from the pathway that developmental pathway?
I mean, sex identity and gender, sex realities, differentiation of the gonads, and gender identity are never the same.
No.
They can, well, I'm not going to say they're never the same. They sometimes will complement each other, but sometimes
they won't. Just like this, very very easily explained, that gender and identity is less about behavior and cultural, but all to do with biological. Something happened along the developmental process that altered the system. So while there are a number of genetic biochemical studies on gender identity, we don't fully understand the involvement of specific genes. See, that's why we can't say, without a shadow of a doubt, Dylan, you're a female. Well, no, because there's not a full understanding of the specific gene. So basically what you're saying, that you feel like a dude, but you're like, why would you say you feel like a dude if you don't,
why would you call yourself Dylan?
Yeah, why? Do you think that you're crazy or something? Yeah. I mean, you're like falling for the programming that tells us from the time we're little that we're wrong. And they're the ones that are wrong because they're the dinosaurs. The studies, the new beliefs are there, written in simple language.
So Marcy joins us too and says, Darcy says, males that look completely male having XX chromosomes? Yes.
Yeah.
the De La Chapelle, I think it is.
And here is
Males.
the article, other article that uh, we're reading
Yeah,
from.
see, what we need to understand is that humans come in all shapes and sizes. And that also goes for not only height, color of hair, sexual preference, but also in varying ways of expressing their own gender identity.
Right.
And having a particular, organ doesn't change the fact that people, you've got like really feminine and then really masculine, and there's this gender spectrum
Mm-hmm.
and this beauty of humanity that exists, and we are all a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we all fit inside wherever it is that we want to fit in, right?
Exactly. So it is likely.
It is likely that genes, which in turn code for proteins, enzymes, and hormones, more than any other factor, play a role in transgender identity. Can some of these genes reside on the X or Y chromosomes? Perhaps, in my opinion, looking for biological variables as arbiters of gender identity is not a great idea for society. We don't even know where all these different genes, how
Coded
they
proteins,
express themselves.
enzymes. Yeah.
I mean, we're such at an infancy with how all of this works, how our bodies work, and the important thing is that just looking at the biological variables isn't enough to categorize humanity as human, as male, as female. Because as I was saying, in the case of a complete androgen insensitivity syndrome female who is really chromosomally a male, you would never imagine. You would never imagine some of the most beautiful model-esque females can't, they have undescended testicles.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's right. It's also Darcy says he's going to stop testosterone for a while to give his body a cleanse. He wants hormones to work better on me. It hasn't changed me as much as it should have. If you don't mind me asking, how much are you on per week, and what kind of what kind of hormones are you on? Patches or how do you call it? Gel or injectable? And there are many different. It all depends on how your doctor is willing to work with you. Maybe cypionate isn't working that well for you. They could try decadurabolin. There are different types of androgenizing medications that your doctor, if he's willing or she is willing to work with you on that. The pellets is also another choice, but stopping it, I've done that on several occasions, and every time I do and I go back on, it actually gives me a boost. Yeah, so definitely. Okay.
so Dylan says, I'm not saying I completely disagree, Darcy, Mark, and Lynna. Darcy says, Dylan, are you saying that my brain is female regardless of how I feel and the male hormones that I take because it developed as female from when I was born?
He said that?
Darcy. So he's asking Dylan if Dylan thinks. Right.
And again, not everyone that identifies as trans is actually trans. I can't say that every single person that's ever transitioned is actually, and that's why we have detransitioning. That's something that you got to like really soul search and dig deep and find out. But that there are biological reasoning behind it, we're seeing it now in the science. And Terry joins us. And Terry says there are people who started out with possibility of being twins, but ended up as one person. This may happen more often than we know. Your organs might have male DNA, but your blood and saliva XX. There's so many different possibilities. Lots of different possibilities.
There's a bunch of comments. Did you want
me to read them? Go ahead.
Very interesting, Marcy says. If we think about it, we are born from a male and a female. We are half our mom, half our dad. Like I shared before, doctors thought I was a boy up until I was born.
Yeah, and it's so incredibly complicated. It's not as simple as chromosomes or genitals. There's enzymes, there are, amino acids. There are so many different things that play a crucial role in gender identity. And people think that gender identity is not a thing, but it is a massive thing. It's not just a social construct as many people thought it was.
And Darcy says, or did I misread it? Are you saying because I'm biologically female that my brain developed male? Trying to see if I read you wrong. And then Dylan says,
Darcy, no, I'm saying that our brains aren't developed the same as normal females. So to me, it is a condition. And I'm on gel right now. I got tired of injecting the gel dosage. I don't understand too well. I tried the gel at one point in the beginning. I didn't like it. I don't think it has an effective delivery. Injectables to me have always been, the true and true. That's how you really get changes. The gel is more like a maintenance. If you've already achieved all your changes, then you could do the gel just maintenance. But if you're trying to get your changes, injectables, in my opinion, is what will create those changes. Or even pellets. I don't know if you're able. I know that insurance doesn't cover pellets, and it can be expensive, but it's all up to you. Like I said, I didn't like the gel at all. So, how genes and evolution shape gender and transgender identity?
mismatch between biological sex and gender identity, culminating in its severest form as gender dysphoria, has been ascribed to mental disease, family dysfunction, and childhood trauma.
But accumulating evidence now implies biological factors in establishing gender identity and a role for particular genes. Variants subtly differ. Different versions of genes linked with gender identity might simply be part of a spectrum of gender and sexuality maintained throughout human history.
Some young boys show an early preference for dressing and behaving as girls. Some young girls are convinced they should be boys. This apparent mismatch of biological sex and gender identity can lead to severe gender dysphoria, coupled with school bullying and family rejection. It can make lives a torment for young people, and the rate of suicide is frighteningly high.
As they move into adulthood, nearly half of these children, or even more when the studies are closely interrogated, continue to feel strongly that they were born in the wrong body. Many seek treatment, hormones, and surgery to transition into the sex with which they identify.
Although male to female and female to male transitions are now much more available and accepted, the road to transition is still fraught with uncertainty and opprobrium.
Trans women born male and trans men born female have been a part of society in every culture at every time. Their frequency and visibility is a function of societal mores, and in most societies, they have suffered discrimination or worse.
This discrimination stems from a persistent attitude that transgender identification is an aberration of normal sexual development, perhaps exacerbated by events such as trauma or illness. However, over the last decades, growing recognition emerged that transgender feelings start very early and are very consistent, pointing to a biological basis.
This led to many searches for biological signatures of transsexualism, including reports of differences in sex hormones and claims of brain differences, sex genes, and transgender. In the 1980s, I was swayed by the passionate advocacy of Herbert Bauer, a psychiatrist who worked with transsexuals in Melbourne.
He was revered in the transgender community for his willingness to authorize sex change operations, which were highly controversial at the time. Aged in his 90s, he came to my laboratory in 1988 to explore the possibility that variation in the genes that determine sex could underlie transgender.
Dr. Bauer wondered if the gene that controls male development might work differently in transgender boys. These genes, called SRY, and which is found on the Y chromosome, triggers the information of a testes in the embryo. The testes makes hormones, and the hormones make the baby male.
There are indeed variants of the SRY gene. Some don't work at all. And babies who have a Y chromosome but a mutant SRY are born female. However, they are not disproportionately transgender, nor are there many people born with variants of other genes in the sex determining pathway.
After many discussions, Dr. Bauer agreed that the sex determining gene was probably not directly involved, but the idea of genes affecting sexual identity took root. So, are there separate genes that affect gender identity?
So,
let's see here. Dylan, because I already wrote with Terry, and he said he was on Joe.
Dylan says, I've always hated needles. The thought of having to do it myself to achieve the life I want kind of fills me with dread.
It all depends how badly you want it. I've been injecting for tons of years now, and do I love it? No, I don't like needles either, but this is what allows me to be me, and feel comfortable. Darcy says, do trans women get more effective transitions with pills or injection? Would pills for them be considered maintenance, or does it not matter for them as much compared to FTM? Well, the delivery of any kind of hormones, obviously bypassing the liver is the way to do it. So injections for both FTM and MTFs, in my humble opinion, is probably the best. There are different methods, different doctors use different techniques. For instance, yesterday we were listening to a doctor who starts MTFs on pills and then after a while changes them to injectable. Reason being that there is sometimes a conversion from estradiol to estradiol, which is not a good thing. Estrone, which is not a good thing. With trans guys, pills will kill our liver. So that's why there's no pill for testosterone. It has to be through injection, gel, or pellets.
So
Brianna joins us.
Hi, Brianna. I believe pills and injections for MTF are equal. However, injections are safer on the liver. It's whatever it is that becomes more bioavailable to your body. And, for some, they have like a genetic disposition to produce more estrone. So what we're learning about in the past few days is that sublingually taking estradiol pills will, in those trans women, create more estrone, which is the bad estrogen, the one that causes cancer, right. The one that is dangerous, right? It's E2, I believe. E1 is the one that is going to feminize more so. But you need both in like a healthy dose. Exactly. See, because if you have too little of one and too much of the other, then it just doesn't work right, So you need that balance, and it's a very tricky thing for some people.
As far as pills injection being equal, the thing is with pills is a lot harder for the delivery. If you saw the pill deliver, you're not going to get as much delivery, and plus the liver is going to be really affected. Anything that's going to be intravenously is going to go directly to the receptors versus the other. It's got to fight your digestive system. It's got to go through the liver, which the liver is going to probably try to break it down because it'll see it as a toxin. And so that's why it's so liver taxing, because, your liver is your filter.
I mean, I've been doing sublingually in the last, since the last year and a half or so. And basically, sublingually, they say if you can taste it, you just wasted it. Yeah. So sublingually, what are your thoughts about sublingually with mixing with the saliva?
Yeah, because it actually goes through the portal of digestion. Even though you're letting it melt in your mouth, you're still getting it through the saliva, and it's still going through the liver, which is downgrading it.
But sublingually, it's supposed to go you're supposed to leave it
Yeah, but
there.
you're still getting it. The saliva is there, and it mixes it in with the saliva, and it's going to go in through, because part of digestion comes from your saliva. That's how you create the enzymes to break it down. That's what we were talking about. Buccal, not allowing any saliva to touch it, and then let it go through the buccal tissue, or rectal is another way of possibly doing it. But I injections are always more bulletproof because it's going directly into your bloodstream. But you got to do what your doctor tells you. Talk to your doctor, see what you did injectables for a while, and I think it's a lot healthier. Hormones and health are not synonymous. Okay, we're taking risks when we're doing this. The name of the game is get in and get out. If you can limit the amount, get the changes you're going to change, and then whether you're going to get an orchiectomy so that your body's not fighting it, or you're just going to do it for X amount of years, get the changes, because once those changes are there, really nothing else is happening. It's just toxicity. So Dylan says, I never outwardly expressed this as a kid. It was mostly internal. Never was told it was wrong. I just sort of assumed that it was crazy based on the socialization I was subjected to. Even though maybe they never told you it was wrong, the signals you got from the adults, because if you weren't behaving the way that they expected you to behave, I'm sure that there was some sort of feedback loop to that.
So, Darcy says, thanks for explaining, guys. I thought E2 was estradiol, E1 was estrone. You may be right. I would have to go back and look at that. But regardless, the balance needs to be,
And the more estrone, the more dangers. That's not, you want estradiol more so than estrone.
So Dylan...
Brianna.
Brianna says, Dylan Cole, trans comes in many different types and flavors.
And Darcy says, testosterone gel goes directly into your bloodstream too. Yeah, but I like I said, I tried it, and I didn't like it.
Okay, Darcy, and I know it's like it would be easier and less painful.
Yeah.
I don't like needles either, but if transdermal, is really what everybody should do, then why aren't more trans men doing it?
Right.
Because it's something that is a rare thing, because they're going to prescribe you injections, and those are like foolproof.
Yeah,
right?
It's
like they're bioavailable.
Yeah.
Transdermal, I used to do a patch, it would fall off.
Yeah.
Let
me ask you this, Darcy. If it was so effective, why are you not getting the results that you want?
That's true.
Think about it.
The proof is in the pudding.
I've done injectable. It's the proof is in the pudding. I tried the gel thing because I got tired of injecting. I thought, let me give it a try. I think I was on it for a few months. I'm like, no, give me back my injectables.
I did patches, and I was like, these things keep falling off.
Yeah, and then you're sweating, and then I was married and to a cis woman, and I was like, I had to be careful. I didn't get it on, rub it on her because so I was like, it's too, injection once a week, kapoom, or once every 2 weeks, depending on how you take your dose. I find it be, in my opinion, better.
Yeah. So Marcy says, it's very confusing for me. When I was little, I thought I was a boy until about 4 to 5. I realized I was a female and got extremely dysphoric and just went away. And it just went away as I grew up. It's hard to explain.
Well, they say that the majority of, in that first article that I shared, talks about the majority of children that have gender confusion will outgrow it. Mm-hmm. It's more transient than like if you're already an adult and you're, saying you have gender dysphoria. it's not transient after adulthood, but during childhood. And that makes sense because you're still, once you hit puberty, there's a lot of changes and surges in your hormones.
I mean, just like the the top of the head of a baby isn't completely closed,
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a child is still developing. I mean, it may be out of the womb, but it's still, as a little person, it's still, that person is still developing. So it makes sense that it would be transient, because there's still kind of like, and contrary to what people think, there are like antagonizers and promoters to your sexual expression and everything, and those are occurring simultaneously within your body. So you're constantly like being pulled and pushed in different directions and stuff. And depending on where you're at in your development, outside of the embryo and finally outside of the womb, finally as a person, you're finally going to be able to develop. And I think that's one of the reasons why, we would talk about puberty blockers being dangerous, because we thought, and back then we were getting pummeled by people and saying that we were haters of the trans community and stuff. But, prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed, platelet development isn't completely, isn't done.
You got to wait, you got to wait. And I know it's hard because you don't want to deal with the secondary characteristics, but it beats then having regret. So, let's see here. I'm going to keep reading the articles. Brianna says, I couldn't do patches, but it's getting popular. And Dylan says,
he goes, damn, that chest, it looks good.
That's my pride and glory. My chest. Thank you, Dylan. And Darcy says, I was on injectable for a while, but it didn't do much. So I switched to the gel. My body didn't develop as much as it should. I still had wide hips. I have patchy facial hair, and my voice changed. And your voice changed?
Barely any body hair. My brother still has more body hair than me.
I don't know. Sometimes it's the free flowing testosterone. You may not have the receptors there. With me, it was so instant. With me, it was just 6 months. I mean, it's almost like, whoa, I had to like adapt so quickly to the changes because it really happened. But a lot of it, I have progestin-induced virilization. I'm intersex, so that could also, be my rapid change. But, finding a good doctor that's able to work with you and able to really manipulate, those receptors, whether it's through growth hormone, whether it's through trying to find another means of androgen, input, it's just trying to find a doctor that's able to do that. And not all of them are that well versed, actually, unfortunately.
I mean, we would be talking about it, privately, but we kind of wonder why doctors aren't into like helping the patients that are trans men fully develop as the men that they want to present themselves to be.
They give these little minute doses. I mean, imagine when you're in puberty, you get a massive surge. That's why, it's all of a sudden that little high-pitched voice goes really deep. It's a massive surge. It's not this little, and there's just things that happen during puberty. They need to duplicate that puberty, and they're not doing it right, in my humble opinion,
And in trans women, they're not duplicating that right either, because, a trans woman shouldn't be at levels of a pregnant woman all day long. I mean,
that's dangerous.
That's not good.
That's why there's a lot of depression and there's a lot of complications, because they're not duplicating, in a woman's cycle of, 30-day cycle or 28 days, there's different levels that's happening. They're just giving you the same thing. You're like,
sitting at the same level.
That's not good. That's where there's complications. They need to learn how to duplicate the natural production, both in men for FTM and both in women for MTFs, so that they could get, the least amount of danger or complications with the most effect.
But we're working on past information.
Old information.
WPATH hasn't revised their standards of care
Yeah.
in over like 20 years. I mean, it seems like their stuff's like from 2000, So they literally, they have outdated modes, that do not serve the trans community very well at all. I mean, if they're recommending Spiro, that's
shooting you in
that's
the foot. That's killing your
that's
breast
just-
development right there.
right.
And it, most people don't know that, and any kind of blocker is going to mess with your breast development. But they just like hand stuff out like candy. They don't know what they're doing. But heck, this whole concept of why we have gender dysphoria is still in the baby stage, as we're continuing to read here. Evidence for gene variants in transgender. The search for gene variants that underlie any trait usually start with twin studies. There are reports that identical twins are much more likely to be concordant, that is, both transgender or both cisgender, than fraternal twins or siblings. This is probably an underestimation, given that one twin may not wish to come out as trans, thus underestimating the concordance. This suggests a substantial genetic component.
More recently, particular genes have been studied in detail in trans women and trans men. One study looked at associations between being trans and particular variants of some genes in the hormone pathway.
A recent and much larger study assembled samples from 380 trans women who had or planned sex change operations. They looked in fine detail at 12 of the usual suspects, quote unquote, genes involved in hormone pathways.
They found that trans women had a high frequency of particular DNA variants of 4 genes that would alter sex hormone signaling while they had been developing in utero. There may be many other genes that contribute to a feminine or a masculine sexual identity. They are not necessarily all concerned with sex hormone signaling. Some may affect brain function and behavior.
So y'all listening to this, okay? Gene involved in hormonal pathway. They found that in trans women, they had a very high frequency of a particular DNA variant of 4 genes that would alter their sex hormone. At the same time, other genes contribute to a feminine or a masculine sexual identity. Okay? I mean, this is not just like feeling. This is not just like social construct. This is not just little boys that like to play with dolls. Okay, this is something deeper that's being ignored because there's a system that does not want to fully admit that there's something going on. The next step is exploring this further would be to compare whole genome sequences of cis and transsexual people. Whole genome epigenetics analyzes looking at the molecules that affect how genes function in the body. Might also pick up differences in the action of genes. These are like live communicating factors. It's not just as black and white as people are trying to make it out to be. So it's probable that maybe hundreds of genes work together to produce a great range of sexual identities.
Maybe hundreds.
Hundreds.
Okay. So let me see who's reading.
I think the last thing.
Dylan, it's scary because these days the first sign of gender dysphoria and parents try to force a transition on them.
They have to be very careful, because not everyone is trans. Not everyone actually does have a biological or ideology to it. And Brianna says, Darcy, do you do lab work every 6 weeks or so to check your T levels? Wow, that's a lot. If you have to go do blood work every 6 weeks, you're working just for blood work.
3 months away.
Yeah. I mean, usually they recommend every 3 months in the beginning and then every 6 months. I got to a point where I was just doing it once a year because I've been at this for so long. Although if you leave it up to them, they want you in there every 3 months.
Dylan, yes, that's a tough call. But I think at certain age, kids know who they are, like myself. I was very confused until I grew into who I was, if that makes sense.
That's why the whole concept of persistent, insistent, You know, um, I think it's hard because sometimes you could be a very feminine little boy and he just turns out to be gay because there is a difference, but it's a tough call. And Darcy says, Brianna, my endocrinologist says my levels are good. To be honest, he seems really lazy and doesn't really want to take risk into changing to other methods of changing the type of tea I'm on. I don't know what to do. Maybe go to another provider.
Yeah.
It's time, what's that saying? If you expect a change and you keep doing the same thing, and that's madness. If you're not happy with your results, you might need to go to somebody who's a little more advanced, who knows a little bit more. Sometimes these doctors don't know anything and they're following the W path and they're antiquated.
And maybe he could be anti-trans, or she could be anti-trans.
Yeah, so she's barely giving you,
like, oh, see, it doesn't work for you, and trying to get you to be discouraged.
Maybe injecting every week, changing the brand that you're on. Sometimes, if you're getting a generic brand, it might not be as potent.
Or move to Argentina.
Argentina testosterone. Guaranteed. Whoa, that stuff was potent.
It's like bear testosterone. Turns you into like a raging bull.
Yes, that was like, I don't know what it is with the United States.
How long was it? Like you were doing bioavailable?
I was doing bioidentical for the longest time, which is weaker, and then I moved to Argentina, and first of all, you don't even need a script to get testosterone.
You just walk over.
Pharmacy, I need testosterone, to give it to you in these little ampules. And I started injecting, and like the second week, all of a sudden, like all this hair, I'm like, what in the world is happening? I mean,
starting to turn into a werewolf. I was
to a werewolf. So it was like,
you should check out some of those older videos that he did.
Yeah,
I mean, back there in Argentina,
yeah,
his like face is like all mooned out.
I was like,
I mean, it was like,
yeah, crazy stuff. And then, I'm sorry. And then if you also have your bits still in there and they're fighting you, you might have too much estrogen, which is fighting with your testosterone. You might need to get a histo. That'll take you to another level. There's just so many things.
And that's not something you want to ignore, because eventually it's not a matter of if you should do it. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of doing it.
You have to, because the tissues start to change. And there's just, I mean, I had a histo right away. I had both top and histo surgery at the same time to get everything out of the way. And that definitely is a game changer. So let's see here.
Marcy says, you may have answered this already, but are trans women on estrogen at high risk of cancer like cis women on it?
Of course. Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
It's plain Russian roulette. It's a lot of people are in denial about it. But obviously, anything synthetic in your body can create cancer. That's why all these, and especially estrogen, anything estrogenic, this is why we see a lot of cancer, because everything in our environment is very estrogenic. It's like one of those things where you get in and get out. If you're going to, you need to either get an orchiectomy, do something about it so that, your body's not fighting itself. And I don't recommend it long term. My opinion, that's my own humble opinion.
And the truth is that the consensus is for NATO women, the jury's already been decided in that, that it's not
healthy.
Yeah, you shouldn't do it more than what they recommend.
Yeah, it's like alleviation of postmenopausal. Once that's gone, get off of it. And
that's for genetic females.
So, with trans women, my thing is like more than 5 years, you don't mess with that stuff, because now you're just, you're just adding bullets to the chamber. All right. So Dylan says, Marcy, it's a gray area, but that's why they need to be free to live their lives the way they want, instead of being told they're one thing or the other.
And Darcy says, Marcy, I was like that too back to what you said. My mom and the doctor said I was going to be a boy. My mother carried me the same as my brother and thought for sure I was going to be a boy, but I came out a girl.
And Marcia says, agreed. I'm sure a doctor would said I was trans when I was little. Yeah, and, they have a name for it now, trans, but it's disorders of sexual development, basically. They want to like put everything in little boxes. You're intersex, you're trans, you're this, it's like dysfunctional. What is it called again? This one, not dysfunctional, disorders of sexual development, and it happens all the time, more than people know, so many things could go wrong in that pathway, as we continue. Let me see here real quick. Mark, if I get my ovaries removed, would I get better results? Definitely, because you have nothing fighting you. Right now, your estrogen and testosterone are at tug of war, So, where are we right here?
How would sexual identity genes work in transgender? Sexual identity genes don't have to be on sex chromosomes, so they will not necessarily be in sync, quote unquote, with having a Y chromosome and an S or Y gene. This is in line with observations that gender identity is separable from biological sex.
This means that among both sexes, we could expect a spread of more feminine and more masculine identity. This is to say, in the general population of males, you would expect to see a range of identities from strongly masculine to more feminine. And among females in the population, you would see a range from strongly feminine to more masculine identities.
This would be expected to produce trans women at one end of the distribution and trans men at the other. This occurrence of a range of differing identities would be comparable with a trait such as height. Although men are about 14 centimeters taller than women on average, it's perfectly normal to see short men and tall women. It's just a part of the normal distribution of a certain human characteristic expressed differently in men and women.
This argument is similar to that which I previously described for the so-called gay genes. I suggest that same-sex attraction can readily be explained by many male-loving and female-loving variants of mate choices genes that are inherited independently of sex.
Why is transgender so frequent then? Transgender is not rare. MTF 1 out of 200, FTM 1 out of 400. If gender identity is strongly influenced by genes, this leads to questions about why it is maintained in the population if trans men and trans women have fewer children.
And that's interesting because those numbers have changed dramatically. 1 out of 200 and 1 out of 400. And I think that 1 out of 400, I think it's pretty even.
Yeah.
I think that reason they're probably seeing that because a lot of trans guys just kind of go stealth, blend in. No one, they don't even have a way to really follow them. I suggest genes that influence sexual identity are positively selected in the other sex. Feminine women and masculine men may partner earlier and have more kids, to whom they pass on their gender identity gene variants. Looking at whether the female relative of trans women and the male relative of trans men have more children than average would test this hypothesis.
I made much of the same argument to explain why homosexuality is so common. Although gay men have fewer children than average, I suggested gay men share their male-loving gene variants with their female relatives, who mate earlier and pass this gene variant onto more children. And it turns out that the female relatives of gay men do have more children.
So these variants of sexual identity and behavior may therefore be considered example of what we call sexual antagonism, quote unquote, in which a gene variant has different selective values in men and women. It makes for the amazing variety of human sexual behaviors that we are beginning to recognize. And I'm going to go ahead and put this link on the chat as well. Let's see here. Yep, there we go.
Marcy says, I still have my baby blanket. LOL.
And Dylan says, Darcy, I would gladly donate my ovaries. Yeah. And Darcy says,
I don't know.
Oh, right here. Right here.
Marcy, oh, I see. You should get your chromosomes tested. Not sure what test this is thought that you'd have to ask the doctor for.
Again, chromosomes mean absolutely nothing. This is what we've been talking about the entire show. It's about the SRY gene. It's about certain what would be the word that I'm looking for? Certain sequences that follow with other genes and uh, communication between DNAs and also the chromosomes are like the least of the denominator for all of this. It goes way deeper. And again, all the if you guys follow the chat, I've put all the links on there. Let's see here.
Dylan says, I would gladly donate my
Yeah,
ovaries.
I read that earlier. And Dylan, same here. If it was possible, I would donate my ovaries to trans women. I think there's going to come a time where we're definitely going to see a lot of great, with stem cells and the ability to have nanotechnology where you inject certain chemicals that will just literally change a person from it's almost like it'll create like if you're born with a developed p, it'll like do something where it will be able to invert itself and just like things will, I mean, it sounds crazy in sci-fi, but I think there's going to come a time when that will be possible.
I think, what happened to Lily Elba back in the 1930s and stuff, they didn't have any anti-rejection, medications and stuff like that, drugs. And with the understanding of our own stem cells and the capability that doctors and biologists and scientists have in producing various different types of human organs. I mean, there's going to come a time when a trans man will be able to
grow his own through his own cells, through his own stem cells. It will be created in the body in and of itself. It won't need, they won't even probably need to cut us open or do anything like that. It would be, very amazing science. So what makes you a man or a woman? Geneticist Jenny Graves explains. So let's see here.
There are many cultural and social factors involved in making a baby into a man or a woman. But biologically speaking, sex starts when you're just a tiny group of cells in your mother's uterus.
You have a pretty good general idea of how maleness, quote unquote, or femaleness, quote unquote, develops in a human embryo and how this is translated into the capacity to make eggs or sperm.
We're also beginning to understand how many other genes contribute to the amazing variation in human sexual development, behavior, and identity.
The early flexibility in the system is fascinating. It reminds me of Arthur Hugh Lofton's iconic Push My Polio, two-headed character in the Dr. Dolittle story, who is in a tiss to decide which way to go.
Germ cells and gonads. Most cells in our bodies are destined to die, but set aside in an embryo are a few cells that retain their ability to become a whole person. These cells, called primordial germ cells, ultimately develop into sperm or eggs.
But they have a long journey to get there. About 3 weeks after conception, 50 primordial germ cells are set aside in membranes outside the embryo. They multiply and make an epic march into the embryo, moving right through the embryonic gut. These cells arrive in the embryonic gonads by 6 weeks.
Later, they receive signals that direct them to become sperm that are made in their billions throughout the life of a man, or to become the 20,000 eggs a girl is born with.
Eggs and sperms are unique in that each have half the number of the chromosomes as other cells. People have 2 copies of the human genome in every body cell, one from mom and one from dad.
Germ cells need to cut this back to a single genome, which is a mixture of the 2 parents' genes. This is accomplished by a clever type of cell division called meiosis, in which the 46 chromosomes replicate once, but the cell divides twice.
So the organs in which all this happens are gonads, testes in men, ovaries in women. Gonads start off as ridge of cells on either side of the backbone to be about 5 weeks after conception. This genital ridge starts off the same in all embryos.
But in embryos destined to be boys, the genital ridge receives a signal called the testis determining factor at 10 weeks after conception. This signal kickstarts development of testes and suppresses ovarian development.
If it doesn't get the testes signal, the genital ridge waits a few more weeks and becomes an ovary. Then factors from the testes or ovary push the germ cells one way or the other into developing either sperm or eggs.
The gonads don't just make sperm or eggs, they also pump out hormones that affect the whole development of the embryo. The embryonic testis makes testosterone, which directs male development, fashioning a pea and a scrotum. Estrogen has the opposite effect, supporting the development of female genitalia and priming the future breasts.
What and where is the signal that initiates testes? We know the signal that leads to testes development comes from sex chromosomes. The human genome is cut up into 23 long DNA molecules that we see as chromosomes under the microscope. All babies have 22 pairs of ordinary chromosomes, one set of 22 from mom and one set from dad.
But boys and girls differ in the 23rd pair of chromosomes. Girls have 2 copies of a medium-sized chromosome called the X. Boys have a single X and a tiny chromosome called the Y. The names have nothing to do with their shapes, but reflect the mystery of their difference. X for unknown.
At meiosis in the testes, the X and Y chromosomes get segregated into different sperm. 50% of sperm will carry an X and 50% carry a Y. All eggs have a single X chromosome.
So on fertilization, half of the embryos start off with the XX and the other half with the XY sex chromosomes. We know that the Y bears the testis signal because people with only a single X are female and people with 2 X chromosomes and a Y are male.
So the signal must come from a gene on the Y chromosome. In 1990, the signal was pinpointed near the top of the Y chromosome. This section of the Y was present in males and absent in females who had only part of a Y chromosome.
What's interesting, it says here, is this a typo?
Mhm.
It says, so on fertilization, oh no, not that one. Because people with only a single X are female, and people with 2 X chromosomes and a Y are male. Maybe it'll explain it. A gene called SRY was identified in this little bit of Y. It was proved to be the testis determining factor by analysis of some girls who had a normal looking Y but a mutant SRY, and by inserting SRY into an XX mouse embryo, that developed as a male.
So here we are. It's not the chromosome, but the SRY. If there's a mutation, it's a gene, and if there's a mutation or a hiccup, we're going to be able to alter that so-called sex. So how do SRY work, and what can go wrong? Do we have more comments? Put ourselves on pause here and see what we got.
Darcy, I wish I could get mine tested. It would make my life a lot better, especially with my family, and I wouldn't feel crazy as often as I do. I don't understand though, Dylan, just finding out what 23andMe would tell you about yourself.
Why would that make a difference?
I mean, why would your acceptance or non-acceptance by them of you be based on a chromosomal test?
Well, because his parents are very religious, as he has shared before, and he's looking for their approval still. That's where he's at. But your peace is going to come when you no longer seek approval and you're okay with who you are. And Darcy says, Mark, you mean nanobots that would rewrite your entire double helix genome? Yes, that would be nanotechnology, where they inject and everything will be rewritten. And I know they'll be able to do that in the future. So Dylan says,
Marcy, I'm 50% gay. I guess I got that as well.
And Darcy says, Dylan, same here. I seriously want to find out, but I'm scared to ask my doctor. He's kind of a bigot. There's your answer. He's from the Middle East. That's why he's giving you all the.
That's why he's not helping you.
You need to go to another doctor, dude.
Yeah.
Another doctor. Somebody is pro-trans that is not, all, yeah, definitely. And Marcy says, there.
LOL, we are all very unique. I actually, in all seriousness, wouldn't change if I could. It hasn't been an easy life, but it's made me who I am.
And that's what's beautiful, that unique, we're different. Doesn't mean we're better, and that's what makes this world a wonderful place. Imagine if we were all the same, how boring it would be. We need to celebrate who we are without feeling shame. Dylan, own who you are. Seeking approval, you're never going to find happiness. That's how I freed myself. When I finally said I couldn't care less what my mother thought anymore, what anybody thought anymore, I'm going to be me, and I'm going to walk with my head up high and be proud of who I am.
It's not selfish to love yourself. Yeah. It's not selfish to want the best for yourself. It's not a bad thing. I mean, I know that, Christianity teaches, that you're dirt and that you're a worm and that you don't deserve it. And only by, the grace of God are you saved and all that. But
that's a cult mentality. They want something. They want to control humanity. We need to free ourselves from that mentality completely. That's the only way to find true happiness and peace. So Marcy says, no, I think I already read that. Dylan.
What?
Dylan,
my doctor doesn't seem to agree with my transition. I can tell by the way he treats me and talks to me.
Right there. I mean, you didn't even have to tell us that.
Yeah.
You need a new doctor, dude.
Yeah.
He's like,
if you're wondering, you just answered your own question.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Marcy says you need a new doctor. You should always feel comfortable with the doctor in charge. You need to find somebody who's trans friendly, and I know sometimes it's hard. I even found something online today where you could actually, it's a trans setup where, somebody comes and takes your blood work. They charge you, I think it's $100 and something initial consultation. And then they do blood work, and the blood work is $100 and something. And then they set up your hormone profile depending on, and if you already have been on hormone, they continue the same, or something like that. There's like all sorts of different things out there this day and age. There's no need to be with some bigoted doctor who doesn't understand you. And Brianna says,
when you said Middle East, I was like, I know what time it is. Yeah
it's not cool. Let's see here, I just lost. Okay.
Marcy, I was thinking about getting a female doctor. They seem less judgmental, especially in their profession.
You just need to find somebody who has been treating transgender people, who has a record of that. These, and I know it's hard to find, but if you Google and and again, there's even stuff online, that could be done if you don't have a lot of doctors in your area. Arabian, yeah, they're really.
Oh boy,
yeah. Yeah.
I'm a Canadian, but Canada is really multicultural.
Yeah. Let's see here. Well, I thought you were U.S., but here in Canada is very progressive for trans rights. Yes, you should be able to find a good doctor if you're in Canada, because that's gracious. Yeah.
There's so many, freedoms that Canadian care provides, medical assistance, and they pay for everything there.
Yeah. Marcy says, Dylan, I highly suggest with my whole heart not getting ministry counseling, like you said the other night. Heart not getting ministry counseling.
Yeah, going to some pastor some Christian counseling service to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, what they're going to say.
Of course.
I mean, and they could be compassionate about it too, but at the end of the day, they don't want Dylan to be Dylan.
No.
Let's just put it that way.
Exactly. So why is transgender so frequent then?
Well, as I said before, transgender is not rare. MTF's 1 in 200, FTM 1 in 400. I suggest genes that influence sexual identity are positively selected in the other sex. Feminine women and masculine men may partner and have more kids. I thought we read that already.
Did we already read that?
I made the same argument to explain my blah blah.
Well, I think we did,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was-
so it's
that
this
was-
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do the SRY
Oh,
work?
there we go.
Right one.
Once the SRY gene was identified, we all thought it would be just one or two steps between SRY and the activation of other genes that make a testis. But it turns out there is a complex web of reactions controlled by at least 30 genes. Some promote testis development, some promote ovary development, some antagonize testis formation, others antagonize ovaries. It is a real push me, pull you situation.
There are also genes. One example is a DMRT1 that keeps gonads on a clear pathway of development. If you knock such genes out, cells in the testes start behaving like an ovary cell, or cells in the ovary start acting like testes. Do you see the complications here? And the DMRT1 gene, okay, that'll constant. That's what you were talking about. That keeps like trying to keep you at that certain sex, or it could have literally just knocked the other gene out. But it doesn't stop here.
Remarkably, this one gene, SRY, through its networks and hormonal influences, affects the activity of more than 6,500 genes of our total 20,000 differently in men and women. So males and females really are genetically very different, both in the genes they have and how active they are.
A mutation in any one of the 30 genes involved in a complex web of gonad differentiating reactions can lead to sex reversal, XY females or XX males, or incomplete gonad differentiation. For instance, some females have a Y chromosome and an intact SRY gene, but lack the protein that receives signal from male hormones. So lacking a protein will make that signal go mute. You know,
but it's still there.
It's there, but it's not communicating.
And some XY females are missing a bit of chromosome 4 that contains the gene DMRT1. You need 2 copies of this gene to be male, even with an SRY gene.
Other genes control sex characters. There are hundreds of genes needed to make sperm. Some lie on the Y chromosome near the SRY, but others are on the X or scattered throughout the genome, but active only in males. The same is probably true of making eggs.
There are also many other genes involved in sexual differentiation, making organs like peas and breasts. Some gene variants are involved in choice of sexual partner. There are probably hundreds of so-called gay genes that I have suggested are really male-loving genes, and there may be also hundreds of female-loving genes.
These genes variants are common because in the outer sex, they express as especially male-loving females and female-loving males who seem to mate earlier and have more children.
I think the same may be true of genes that affect gender identity. Gene variants that promote a strong male identity might not always go along with a Y chromosome, and genes that promote a female identity may be incongruously partnered with a male determining Y.
Transgender identity may be common because, like gay genes, such gene variants would be strongly selected in other sex. Women with a strong female identity and males with a strong male identity might mate more enthusiastically and have more offsprings.
It is extraordinary that something so fundamental and critical for species survival as sex should be controlled by such a complicated and variable web of genes. We have to thank evolution for providing us with such complexity and learn to celebrate the fantastic variations that nature has ensured. And that would be the existence of people with differing types of sex realities, identities.
Right. And there's the link to that article down there. So Dylan says, Marcy, I wish I could, but it's free and they offer non-religious bias, so it I mean, it's all I have. I can't afford any other options. It's kind of like probably shaping a lot of, the way you think, and it's rough.
Well, you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter if they're gonna not be in your face, but if their basis for counseling you is to try to convert you and to use it as a way, as a conversion therapy,
Yeah.
you know what their end goal is, Dylan.
Yeah.
I mean, that's up to you. I mean, the counseling that you get from a pastor,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he also says,
So if all true trans people were tested, they would all have this SOY gene thing. Still seems a bit more far-fetched than having a mental condition.
why would you say far-fetched? Again, you're being influenced by certain things. Um, to say that one has a mental condition that alters one's identity versus a biological, which we've like read throughout, shows a lot of proof, with the new science that's coming out, that there's a slew of different things that happens in development, and you can believe in intersex, which that word to me is more appropriate of the what is it called, development,
Development, disorders of sexual development.
exactly, where there are things that are clearly going on versus how individuals with mental conditions usually don't function very well in life, because their psychosis or and not to say that people that are trans don't have mental conditions, but gender identity is not one of those conditions. Having gender dysphoria stems from a deeper place that deals with genes, that deals with development, that deals with a slew of different genes, and one of them was the what was it called again?
DMRT1,
DMRT1,
WNT4.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many different things that prove that it's biological and not psychological. And it's been actually recently proven that there is not a mental condition behind it that
World
people,
Health Organization.
Yeah, the World Health Organization has, totally debunked the whole mental thing. That people have mental issues, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Because you've been programmed to believe that you're bad. I mean, look at the way you speak. It's clearly that, you've been broken. Your spirit has been broken. You think badly of yourself. And I can relate. We've all been there. Until you learn to love yourself fully and not let people that don't understand you influence your thought process, you're going to continue to believe that.
Or belief systems that,
Yeah.
They exist in order to subjugate you to that.
Yep. So
let me say some more. Darcy said, Brianna said, "Oh, cool. I thought you were US, but I hear Canada is very progressive for trans rights." Darcy says, Brianna, Canada is not as progressive as you think. I live in Alberta, and they are harsh on us because it's a conservative province.
So,
if you could save one person from the pure mental anguish I went through with ministry counseling, who swore they loved gays but hated the sin,
yeah,
but they made me want to kill myself, says Marcy.
Yeah, that's what happens. That's exactly what happens. Where are we here?
So if all so sorry to hear you had to go through that, Marcy.
Yeah.
Science is explaining the disconnect with brain and gender. It's not a mental problem per se. It's proving being trans is real and proven. Everything Mark and Lynna just read explains a lot.
I know, but it's like Dylan is like he's been programmed, and he's like, we were there. We were there. I mean, trust me. What do you think I detransition? It's like it gets in your head, and you start believing the things that they say to you. You're bad. You're defective. You need to repent. You need to this, that, and the other. And it's like, no, these people have no clue what they're talking about. It's like, okay, so you don't have a mental condition when you believe in a sky daddy versus believing in biology that something has actually gone wrong in your body. It's
or just wrong is a way of describing it in today's society, but sexual differentiations and the way the pathways form and stuff could be naturally selected by just being human. This could just be a regular occurrence that takes place. And it's just as society isn't accepting of it.
Exactly. It's like people wouldn't accept people writing with their left hands, and they would try to break you of it. All sorts of different things, that society didn't deem as normal, and they demonized it, and nowadays it's like I read an article about masturbation, how it's good for your immune system. And we've been taught, oh, don't do that. It's bad. It's sinful. It's this. It's like, no, it's healthy for you. Sex is healthy. They demonize everything, and it's crazy.
So,
tired triangle.
Darcy says,
join this.
Dylan, are you a trans guy? Or are you a woman who thinks she may be a trans guy? That's your take on yourself. Do you see yourself as a woman with a mental disorder?
I mean, yeah, And Darcy says, Marcy, I agree. And Marcy says, Dylan, it makes total sense how science is explaining all of this. I didn't see it as a mental condition neither. Does science? I mean, there is a biological ideology to all of this. The dinosaurs don't want to let go of the old way. They're holding on, but it's XX and it's XY. Look down. It's like, listen, this right here, and welcome, Tired Triangle, who's snorting after I said Sky Daddy. For some species, the girls come with boy bits. Okay. Even nature has, in animals, there are many animals that change sex. It's like part of the normal things about them. And there's females who actually have the male parts. I bet you guys didn't know this. I didn't. We just learned this when found in this article. Did you know that human females have male genitalia? The clitoris is assumed to be the female version of male genitalia, a vestigial structure that remains in the female body because of its immense importance in males. The mere evolutionary byproduct that is the clitoris is a source of pleasure for orgasmic females everywhere. Despite this evolutionary homology, the structures are from a common origin but have since diverged. Human genitalia between the sexes are morphologically distinct. There are girl bits and boy bits, and they're easily identifiable.
But
right?
This isn't the case for all mammalian females. In some truly astonishing twists of evolutionary oddness, ladies in several mammalian orders have evolved external genitalia resembling that of their male counterparts. The penile clitoris is the name given to these structures, which are essentially hypertrophied clitorises that resemble the phallus. Pseudopenises are most well known for their presence in elephants and spotted hyenas, and they make it nearly impossible to differentiate between the sexes using mere external morphology.
So you know how
look down,
everybody's trying to, and it's made out of the same material, as many trans guys know. Once you start Testosterone, what tends to happen? The gland clitoris becomes a gland penis. It starts to resemble. In elephants, males and females have an identical anogenital distance, which means that the amount of physical space between the anus and their penis or penile clitoris is exactly the same. Moreover, males have no scrotum, which is usually a handy way to determine maleness in mammals that have retractable penises. However, social context in elephant does provide fairly reliable information about the sex of individuals.
Adult female elephants are never without a group, whereas adult males are never part of one, unless a male is copulating with a female. Females live together with other females and offspring, and then males reach sexual maturity. They are evicted and forced to live as solitary individuals or as part of small bachelor pods. When a female is in oestrus, which is rare, approximately 2 to 3 days every 4 years,
That's a long time.
an adult male is permitted entry into the group for copulation purposes only.
Which male, you ask? A delightful psychological and behavioral process called much determines the identity of the lucky suitor. Males that are in much, that's STH, muth, I've never heard of that, experience a five-fold increase in circulating testosterone levels and are extremely aggressive towards other males.
If a different non-must male attempts to copulate with the oestrus female, chances are he will be killed by the one in must, who will be making strange vocalizations and emitting discharges from sweat glands and his privates.
As you can imagine, the astonishing genital structure of female elephants means that the act of copulation is not simple. Actually, it is physically impossible for a male to have sex with a female unless she is completely willing, and this is because she must first retract her penile clitoris into her own body. Think about turning a sock inside out. Only once it is safely tucked inside the female body can the male insert his privates into her vagina.
To put it another way, it's physically impossible to what?
Rape
a female elephant. Females will only ever allow males to have sex with them during the brief period of ovulation, and each act of copulation acts less than 1 minute, though there will be several throughout the day. So not only can male elephants not copulate with a female whenever he wants to, but when a male elephant finally does get to copulate, it lasts for an extremely short period of time. When it comes to sex, it's not much fun to be a male elephant.
As I mentioned earlier, the other lady who is most famous for her boy bits is the spotted hyena. These females have extremely complex penile clitorises, and their external labia are fused together to form a pseudoscrotum. So if you thought you'd be able to determine the sex of a hyena by looking for testicles, you're wrong. The genital structure of female spotted hyenas win them the distinction of being the only mammalian females to copulate, urinate, and give birth through that same penile-like canal. Ouch.
It's even possible for females to achieve erections.
Huh?
There are some slight differences between the genital structure of males and females, namely that the male penis is longer and thinner with an angular head. These characteristics make it easier for him to insert it into the female's genital opening once she's retracted her penile clitoris.
Although the external genitalia are morphologically similar to those of males, the internal urogenital system of female is more traditionally feminine. She gestates offspring in her uterus. However, as we mentioned above, she also gives birth to a 1.5 kilogram baby through the penile clitoris. The birth canal is approximately 2.5 centimeter in diameter, and females often experience severe tearing. The rate of female mortality during childbirth is abnormally high for first-time mothers. The news isn't all that much better for her babies. How often separated from the placenta, get caught in the birth canal, and die from anoxia. Wow.
What are the evolutionary origins of such structures, and in what possible circumstances would it be advantageous for females to evolve such highly masculinized genitalia? There are other mammalian females that possess hypertrophied and masculinized genitalia, such as moles and lemurs, but none possess the remarkable structures of the spotted hyena. Of the 4 species in the family Hyaenidae, spotted, striped, and brown hyenas and aardwolves, only the spotted hyenas have acquired the penile clitoris.
So there are a few schools of thought with respect to the evolutionary origin of this remarkable structure. Hormones called the androgens have always been present in the system of female spotted hyena, and these substances are associated with dominance and social status. In addition, testosterone levels in spotted hyena females are as high as those in males, unlike female stripped or brown hyenas, who are also not socially dominant to their male counterparts.
It's thought that high levels of testosterone are transferred to male and female offspring through the placenta, exposing both sexes to a high level of maleness during gestation. These steroids in adult females make them extremely aggressive, much more so than their male counterparts, despite being of a similar physical size.
So, like, all this stuff could happen, with the levels of T, as when we started out the show this evening, talking about high levels of T in the womb is what creates this gender identity, or this gender dysphoria. I mean, I hope that we're making our point very clear here.
Right.
That it's not a sin, that it's not some mental disorder, that it's not some, social construct. There is biological reasoning for who we are.
Dylan says, quote unquote woman is just a title. It's a word to describe another word. I'd consider myself a female with a disorder that needs to be dealt with. Hopefully, I will get to it. I will get to one day.
Where is that?
No.
Okay, there. Disorder. I'm really sorry, Dylan, that's how you feel. Even after, and hopefully you can go back to all the links and read it yourself and really ingest it a little bit better. But I don't think it's a disorder. I think it's a alteration.
Dylan thinks that.
Oh yeah, that's what I said.
Dylan is suffering from a disorder.
Yeah, I don't think it's sorry, Dylan. I don't think it's a disorder whatsoever. I think it's just a hiccup, an alteration, an evolutionary change that's happening. Our species has been evolving for many, 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 many eons, and I believe that there's something happening as the Y chromosome is dying. It's literally, getting smaller and smaller, and eventually, in they say X amount of time, it's going to disappear. Our species is changing, and I think those of us that are trans-identified or have some sort of sex
gene
variant type of things of that nature is evolutionary, and people are kicking and screaming. The religious sector that you've been very much influenced by has you thinking that way, and I'm sorry that you do feel that way, because it's what's making you struggle. You struggle daily because you want to listen to your insights, to what your inner voice is telling you, but you're being influenced by your outside environment, and you're not alone. There's many that have conversed with me. We've had people email me that come from religious backgrounds, and they struggle with it because of the programming. That programming is deep. It's so deep rooted that it doesn't allow you to find complete happiness and peace with who you are, Dylan. And I hope that you can.
Darcy says it's ironic that Christians call us mentally ill and delusional, but yet they believe in a sky daddy. That seems like it came out of a fairy tale fantasy book.
Exactly. And they're okay with that. They're okay with believing in some, it's like, where is it? But they can't believe, that there's an alteration, another pathway, and that this whole XXXY is really, just a way of control, just a way of trying to simplify something that cannot be simplified.
So Darcy said,
Dylan, then you should just be a girl and figure yourself out. I think transition would only cause you dysphoria, and there's a chance you want to transition back to a woman. Exactly. Exactly. If you have to have that much struggle with it, then that's not for you. And I highly recommend those people that have that struggle as badly with it before you even get started, then there's just, maybe there is some sort of trauma based disorder that you're dealing with. And that's for you, but to put everybody in that same box, that's not cool because I don't feel like I have any mental disorder. My angst was when I was trying to please my family, when I was trying to please the so-called sky daddy that it's like, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, let's see here.
Darcy says, I hope I'm not coming off mean or anything, but I'm just being blunt and wouldn't want to see someone make a mistake.
No, you're not. You're fine.
Good advice.
It's good advice.
It's really good advice.
I mean,
I hope that, more people that have these, premonitions of wanting to transition would heed these words, because it will save you lots of trauma, lots of pain, lots of frustration, and lots of turmoil.
Exactly. And Marcy said, exactly. I believe it's worms that have male and female reproductive organs and can reproduce alone. A few sea creatures are too. Tons. There's a ton. I mean, nature's, it's all over nature. As there's homosexuals in animals, that just, it's the way it is,
Marcy, some fish like from the guppy family can change its gender on a dime, and the male will go through a transformation to female, lose all its bright, pretty colors it sheds off once it turns.
The Ross fish, which I have back here somewhere.
I can't see it. It's way back there.
Yeah, that fish right there.
The wrasse.
The wrasse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got that done on Miami Ink, and I told my story. But yeah, and let's see, who did I miss this one? Exactly, I believe in worms. No, she already read that one.
Honestly, Dylan says.
Oh, is this one? Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's this one right here. There's Marcy, some fish like from the Gumpy. So Dylan, it's perfectly okay to need to figure it out for yourself. Just make sure you're not being your authentic self due to fear of eternal hellfire. Yeah, that's between you and God, no one else. Yeah, and I think Dylan is probably being influenced by that, but he's got to figure, or she's got to figure herself out.
Dylan says,
what? Marcy, this usually happens when you put all male guppies in one tank.
Wow, nature is amazing. So sad humans ignore the true magic of our existence, Marcy says.
Because it's all based on Sky Daddy rules, And let's see here. I knew a few species, but not the guppies. Pretty cool.
Dylan says, honestly, I just want to know my own body at this point instead of guessing at why I'm like this. Personally, a disorder makes the most sense, whether it's biological or psychological. I don't care.
Why does it have to be a disorder, though? I don't know.
Why does the disorder have to be bad?
Yeah.
Why don't you ask yourself that question? I mean, just because something isn't ordered in the way that, typically it would be wired, i.e. XX equals male, XX equals female, XY equals male,
right,
and living according to the gender and sex characteristics that identify you as such.
Right.
Why is that a disorder?
If I recall, Dylan said that they had some form of Asperger. I have a form of Asperger, although it's very highly, and I've worked through a lot of it, and it doesn't affect me as much. But individuals with Asperger's need to put something in a box. It has to fit in a nicely little box, or else, it's like things have to be organized a certain way. If they're not that way, then it's just like havoc. So I think, they're trying to put it in a box so they can
categorize
it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where your thought process stems from. And Darcy says, Marcy, yep, I learned that from my mom's husband.
Dylan, I'm only saying, Marcy says, all this out of kindness, not to make you feel bad.
And yeah, we're all trying to like really understand you and really, trying to help you. I mean, this is what the show and this chat is all about, is to help people figure themselves out, and bring the facts to the table. I absolutely hate when social justice warriors call gender a social construct. It isn't. When they put it like that, it's basically saying gender is what you wear. Gender is a biological hormone component that makes men and women. Exactly. And just like all the articles that we read right there. Yeah, that's right.
Gender roles are a social construct, but gender is biological. Gender is the hormones that make men masculine and women feminine. That's why we take hormones.
Exactly. Exactamundo. It's, people want to make sex like something so black and white, and it's not. It's not at all. I read that one already.
Really?
Yeah. Social construct, when I put that in, basically saying gender is what you wear.
Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, it's more complicated than people want it to be or make it out to be. And there's just, it's not as neat, little boxes. I mean, it's just, there's a slew of things that could happen. Just one amino acid going array will make you from a female to a male. And the chromosomes, you could be an XX.
What if all of a sudden the DMRT1 gene that is firing out of, after you're born, this gene is constantly firing. DMRT1, WNT4 in females is constantly doing its job. What if all of a sudden at the age of 20, 30, or 40, it stops?
Yeah.
What if it stops?
Yeah.
What then? Then those differentiating, that gene that's fighting back, that other version of you, is now not fighting it anymore.
Yeah.
So you have yourself a situation that is not a mental disorder.
No.
It is
biological.
A gene variant that has decided to change, right? And that's what we know about life, is that life changes.
Everything changes.
The cells that we have, they change every 7 years or something. So, I mean, we're talking about the copy of you that existed back when you were 12 is no longer the same person, Wow. So if the DMRT1 or the WNT4 decides to stop firing, then there's nothing telling it, okay,
right,
you're this, you're that, you're this,
So Dylan says, a genesis of the corpus callosum. Mark, you asked, it is on the autistic spectrum. There's basically nothing connecting my left and right brain. And that's where your battle is. And that's why, you're trying to organize things in a certain way because that makes total sense why you're having all those battles with yourself, I just hope you find peace. I really do, because you deserve peace. You deserve happiness.
You deserve to be in peace, and not to be castigated for being you, being Dylan. Exactly. Whatever form of expression that person is you, Dylan, and you have every right within you to be, and just to exist in peace.
Exactly. And Teen joins us. as we're getting ready to
Oh,
call
wow.
it evening.
Hi,
I
Jim.
think she's been watching.
Oh,
I mean, so good talk tonight. Glad you enjoyed it. So I hope this has been educational. You know, I hope that people understand a little bit more that it's not some fetish, that it's not some feeling, although we do sense it because it's, the brain is sending signals. A neurological system is telling us that something isn't right. And there's going to be a lot more information out there as the science continues to advance. And therefore, the dinosaur belief that this is a sin, that is not right, that that it's a social construct and all that stuff, that's all going to go to the side because more and more research is coming out and it's showing people the truth, you know, and people are going to go kicking and screaming, but, that's how it goes.
I mean, do psychological traumas and things exist in people's
Of
lives?
course,
Yes. Are
everyone
there
has
people
some.
who are trans-identified who deal with these things? Yes. Are there transgender people on the autism spectrum? Yes. Are there regular cisgender people on the autism spectrum? Yes. So we can't just corral all these things and just to make one big diagnosis of people just because they're trans,
Right.
and call them mentally disordered.
Right. And so read a couple more comments, and it's already almost 2 hours, but let's see here. Darcy says,
Dylan, I'm sure you're a good girl that has some figuring out to do. Not sure how to address you, so my apologies.
and Marcy says, just be you, Dylan, disorder, so whatever, be you. Don't let anyone put you down or hinder your journey. Take your time. And time is very important. You got to figure yourself out. You're still in college. You're still at home. You're still, there's a lot of PTSD from what you've had to deal with. You have to work that out. You have to sort yourself out. Take your time. Don't beat yourself up, Just try not to use so much absolutes, because absolutes is not our friend. When we say, this is what this is, we learn something new every day. And putting something in a box doesn't help anyone, because absolutes is not our friend, And Dylan says,
ACC is one of the main reasons why I think I have this gender disorder. It's not just a learning processing condition. This is why I say that my family doesn't agree that GD is separate.
But how much does your family know about this? They don't. They just have a belief, a religious belief, and they refuse to accept that there's an ideology behind this. I mean, because you're autistic or in the autistic spectrum, does that make you have gender dysphoria? Okay, well, it's a neurological pathway that has obviously some impact on your identity, on how you see yourself, on what the signals that your brain is giving you. Does that make that wrong? No, there's a biological reasoning behind it. It doesn't mean that because you have Asperger or in the autistic spectrum that gender disorder or gender dysphoria is wrong. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but
no, you're making sense. But see, whether or not you're dealing with ACC or with GD, it doesn't matter what it is that you're dealing with. Your family should be open to love and accept and to work with you and to be compassionate to you, understanding that if there is a biological basis for things going on within what's happening with you, if they've known it, if they've known you've been a different kid, then they have every responsibility to be compassionate, loving, and accepting of their child. of their relative, because they don't really have a choice in the matter, you know, just to love and to accept.
Exactly. So, you know, it's not easy. I understand, it's not easy for them. It's not easy for you. It's not easy for anyone, but people need to have a little bit more of an open mind instead of being so close minded and so one way track minded, because there's a lot that people don't know. And there's a lot of new information coming out, and people shouldn't be so critical, because we've been around forever, you know, we're in other species already. I think.
Not
Okay. So Dylan says, Darcy, just because I have a different view of why trans people are trans doesn't mean I think I'm a girl. That was something you assumed from our conversation. I don't mean to sound rude.
And then Darcy said,
here it is.
Dylan, I respect that, but you have to understand my point of view, that I see you as confused. You basically said you were a girl. So that's my perspective to see you that way. And you have your perspective.
Okay, so hope you guys enjoyed that. Again, the links are throughout the chat. Anybody that's watching and wants to go in and check out the links, very informative. And we will continue to bring you more information. If anyone's interested that's watching that has a story to tell, I think we might have a detransitioner coming up who I feel that her story is important to tell. I feel that everyone's story is important. We all need to try to understand one another respectfully. We may not agree with everything, but trying to understand and coexist and be respectful is what we're here to do. As cohabitant of this beautiful blue planet. You know,
And it's okay
yeah,
to not agree,
right.
as long as we can be respectful of each other, and to recognize that we're going to have differing opinions, that we're not going to always really get along with
Right.
regards to our opinions. And that's okay.
So I think Dylan and Darcy are getting a little. Let's see. Dylan said, "I said I was female. I didn't say I was a girl. I would be a girl if I didn't have this disorder. This is how I rationalize who I am." And so Marcy says,
Now it sounds like playing with words. I wish you the best, though.
and Darcy says, Dylan, you basically called me a female, so that's your perspective, but I'm allowed to have mine based on what you said for yours.
It's okay. It is what we have as an opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, if you view transgender identity as a mental disorder, a condition that needs, because basically a condition that is wrong
Right.
needs to be corrected. So don't think that the counselor that you're going to is not seeking to correct
Right.
your deviant behavior, because
Quote unquote.
it doesn't matter, quote unquote deviant, because it doesn't matter how they want to paint it, make it look, and how they're going to portray it. And they could be all kind and everything. But the fact is that they're going to tell you that Jesus doesn't approve of you being you.
Yeah. And it's hard to say. I said I was female. I didn't say I was a girl. So I mean, that's like, Marcia said, that's a play on words. It's like, and again, I don't want to tell you how to think or feel. You could only speak for yourself. If you think that what you have is a disorder and you're dealing with that, and that's, but that's not what many of us who have a trans history, who are living as man and woman legally, walking around through life, as the person that we know we are.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, this is me. That is you.
Exactly.
And we live our lives like today we're at the gym, and this guy just comes up to us. What did he say? He just said,
we're preparing our protein drink that we after we work out.
yeah.
And he goes, "Let me ask you, are you guys a couple or are you her trainer? Because you both look, like really fit and look like you know what you're doing." I said, "Well, we're married." And he goes, "Oh wow, I see you in the gym every day, and you guys, you really, I mean, because I'm a trainer. I mean, I know what I'm doing, and we look pretty decent compared to everybody that's there, and for our age and whatever else." But he's just complimenting us.
He was really super nice about everything, and he's just like, I've noticed you guys. You're here every day, and you guys work really hard, and and it was like, we just live our lives.
Yeah.
This is life.
Yeah.
We don't go around like walking down the street and getting made fun of and heckled and joke. I mean, people just, we're Mark and Lynna.
Yeah. And that's what they see.
That's what they see.
It's and that's what the end goal, I'm assuming, of every trans person is to be able to live their life as the sex they're transitioned to, and it's biological. It's not psychological.
We had somebody come in. Oh, wait.
Pure. Hey, I just came across your live. I have a question to ask. There were studies of brain scans done on living and deceased trans individuals that demonstrated their brain wiring is that of the desired sex. Yes, and we talked about it during the stream. We have links throughout the chat, and there is definitely, yes, it would that make gender dysphoria a neurological disorder than a psychological one? It would make it a gene disorder because the SRY gene, I'd have to go back.
I would call it more of a gene variant.
Yeah.
And an expression of that gene variant. And if that's a disorder, if that,
we like to call things disorder when it doesn't apply to the average or the set pathway, but there's many different variations that take place. Is it your typical? No, the typical would be being aligned, but it's more of gender dysphoria because the firing of the brain, it's firing totally different from the genotype,
So, but I would say that it doesn't make us broken. Is what I'm saying. Right. It doesn't make us wrong.
It's just a variant.
It's just a variant of the beauty of humanity, basically. Yeah. And society still doesn't get it. They still haven't caught on to the fact that spectrums exist and that we're not living in a black and white world as everybody would want to categorize things. You're right or the left or XX, XY. I mean, it's always Democrat, Republican. It's always, the polarization of humanity is what divides humanity.
Right.
If we could find what unites us and makes us all human, that would be a much better way for us to get along.
They've actually done the studies on MRIs of people, not dead bodies.
What they have done is actually study that the fact that even before hormones, the brains are functioning differently than their standard, gender, sex, norm.
Right. Dylan's parents and counselor done a great job on Dylan. I tell you, he's like waving their flag really well, really well. I feel bad for you, I really do, because you're really struggling, really struggling. I wish you peace. I really do. So, on that note, I want to eat my last meal, cottage cheese, with yogurt, and berries.
Yeah.
Protein powder right there. Eat.
And I get to go get my hair colored again
Tomorrow.
It's nice. Yeah. When I lose, like I've lost all the nice highlights that I had, so it'll be nice to get them back.
Yes. There are neurological disorders that people with sex, what's it, DS? Differential sex, something or another.
Disorders of sexual development.
It's a disorder of the sexual development, but it's not, it's not something that is fully broken. We've been around since the beginning of time. It's like some kids are born with a cleft palate, some kids are born cross-eyed, some kids, there's just variation. And the neurological disorders of the pathways are not receiving the typical signal. The Asperger thing or the autistic thing definitely is a neurological disorder, but that is not anything to do with your gender nonconforming or your gender dysphoria. It's causational. It's not something that has been totally proven that because you have ACC, whatever it is that you have, it's part of your gender dysphoria. No, that's not at all it. But last comment, and we're going to call it a night. Dylan, there's neurological signatures that can still be picked up after a person dies. Brain scans of a dead brain doesn't inhibit any progress to be made. Yeah, but a lot of these studies have been done on live people. They do MRIs. The first actual comment that or first article that we read talks about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in the beginning of the chat where I shared the link. So anyway,
yes,
we're going to call it a night. And thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed it. We'll be back soon. We'll probably do a couple of shows more before the end of the week. But good night for now. Thank you all. Thank you all for chatting. Remember to subscribe, hit that notification button, and support the channel. There's different ways of doing so in the description. We love you guys, but remember to always love yourselves too. Good night and have a good one. Take care.